In the quietest corner of the old city library, there was a shelf that nobody liked to use. It wasn't because the books were boring or the wood was rotting. It was because the shelf moved. At first, the librarians thought it was just their imagination, a trick of the evening light, but the evidence became undeniable. Every morning, shelf 7B would be in a slightly different position from where they'd left it the night before. Sometimes it was just an inch to the left. Other times it was angled out into the aisle, as if it had tried to step away from the wall. The strangeness didn't stop there. The books on shelf 7B had a life of their own. A librarian would meticulously arrange them by author, only to find them the next day, sorted by the color of their spines. Another time, they were organized by publication date, from oldest to newest. It was a silent, nightly reorganization that baffled everyone. It was as if an invisible, obsessive hand was constantly curating this single collection of books. No one ever saw it happen, but the proof was there every single morning, a quiet testament to the night's unseen activity. Then, things escalated. Books began to vanish. A first edition of a classic, carefully cataloged and placed on the shelf, would be gone by sunrise. In its place, a new book would appear, one that didn't belong to the library. These weren't just any books. They were strange, bound in unfamiliar leather with titles written in languages no one could identify. They smelled of dust and something else, something ancient and metallic, like old blood. The library's digital system had no record of them. They simply materialized from nowhere, taking the place of the books that were stolen away into the night. The librarians started calling it the Phantom Shelf. One night, the head archivist, a man named Arthur who had worked there for 40 years, decided he'd had enough. He convinced the security guard to let him review the overnight surveillance footage. The library was equipped with low-light cameras, casting the familiar halls in an eerie, monochrome glow. For hours, the footage showed nothing but stillness. The long shadows of bookshelves stretched across the floor like sleeping giants. But then, just after 3 a.m., it happened. On this screen, shelf 7B began to move. It didn't shudder or jerk. It glided, smoothly, silently. It slid along the wall, a dark shape moving with an unnatural grace in the deep silence of the library. It was horrifyingly intentional. It wasn't a random shift. It was a deliberate, calculated journey. Arthur watched, his blood running cold, as the shelf navigated the aisle with a purpose he couldn't comprehend. Over the next few weeks, Arthur obsessed over the footage. He charted the shelf's movements. Night after night, he discovered it wasn't random at all. It was tracing a pattern on the floor, a complex symbol he didn't recognize. The path it took each night was a small segment of a much larger, invisible design. It was as if the shelf was performing a slow, methodical ritual, drawing something out over weeks, months, maybe even years. The realization settled in his gut like a stone. This thing wasn't just moving. It was going somewhere. It had a destination. Driven by a mix of terror and academic curiosity, Arthur decided he had to see it for himself. One evening, after the last patron had left and the heavy oak doors were locked, he hid himself in the history section, tucked away behind a row of oversized atlas. It waited. The library descended into a profound silence, a quiet so deep you could hear the hum of the old fluorescent lights. Hours ticked by. The air grew cold. Then he heard it. Not a loud noise, but the faintest whisper of wood against stone. He peeked from his hiding spot. Shelf 7B was on the move, bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the high-arched windows. It glided away from the wall, its shadow dancing grotesquely. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced his legs to move. He had to follow it. He stayed in the shadows, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet as he tailed the ghostly piece of furniture. The shelf moved faster than he expected, turning down aisles he rarely walked, leading him deeper into the oldest, most forgotten wing of the library. The air here was thick with the smell of decaying paper and time itself. As he rounded a final corner, the shelf suddenly picked up speed. It raced down a long, dark corridor, pulling away from him. He broke into a run, his breath catching in his throat. It was leading him somewhere, and a primal part of him screamed to turn back. But he couldn't. Out to canoe. The shelf came to a dead stop at the very end of the hall, in a section of the library that had been closed off for decades. It stood there, waiting for him. As Arthur approached, panting, a low grinding sound echoed in the silence. It looked down the floor directly. Beneath the shelf was moving. A hidden panel, a perfect square of stone he had never known existed, was slowly, painstakingly sliding open. It revealed not a basement, not another room, but a void, a perfect, impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow the faint moonlight. The hole didn't look like it had a bottom. It was just an endless pit of black. From the chasm, a sound began to rise. It wasn't a scream or a growl. It was a chorus of whispers, hundreds, maybe thousands of soft, sibilant voices, all speaking at once, their words overlapping into a chilling, incomprehensible hum. They weren't angry or threatening. They were inviting. They slithered into his ears, weaving a strange sense of calm through his terror. The whispers curled around a single, repeated request, a gentle but insistent invitation. They wanted a book. They were asking him to choose a book from the shelf and drop it into the darkness. Just one book, they promised. An offering. Arthur stood frozen, the whispers washing over him, his hand trembling as it hovered over a strange, leather-bound volume that had appeared on the shelf just that morning. The next morning, the city library did not open. The junior librarians arrived to find the main doors still locked from the inside. Worried, they called the police. When they finally forced the doors open, they found the library exactly as it had been left, pristine and silent. There was no sign of a break-in, no sign of a struggle. Everything was in its place. Everything, that is, except for Arthur. The head archivist was gone. His office was empty, his keys on his desk. They searched every corner of the vast building, but he was nowhere to be found. He had simply vanished. The only thing out of place was shelf 7B. It was back in its usual spot, perfectly aligned with the other shelves, but it was completely, utterly empty. Every single book, both the library's and the phantom ones, was gone. The shelf stood bare, like a skeleton. Clean. The hidden panel in the floor was closed, seamless, as if it had never existed at all. The library is open to the public again now, but no one ever goes near shelf 7B. Sometimes, late at night, the staff swear they can still hear faint whispers echoing from the end of that long, dark corridor, patiently waiting for another offering.